Alright, Brush Monkeys, we're back, and this week I'm going to take a break from the painting table for a little bit to talk about some other stuff in the industry, some other kind of things going on. Most of you have probably noticed that I don't paint Games Workshop miniatures all that much. Excuse me. And in fact, I've kind of been moving my paints away from Citadel's paints and into other brands like Vallejo and P3 and Reaper, with the exception of the contrast paints, which I still think are fantastic, and their washes, which are again fantastic. And I kind of wanted to talk about why a little bit. Part of it is, and I hate to be cliche, but cliches get to be that way for a reason, because they're true. The biggest reason why I'm moving away from Games Workshop stuff is because they're just too expensive. Games Workshop is a multi-billion-dollar company, and the stuff they produce is really nice. Their miniatures all look great, but they're just so expensive for what you get. I mean, they're essentially just little plastic soldiers, and there's a lot of companies producing plastic minis with a high amount of detail that are just as good as Games Workshop for a fraction of the price. And so it's a little bit ridiculous to spend excuse me, to spend that much on minis if you're not actually playing the game. Now I understand if you're into Warhammer 40k or you're into Age of Sigmar, then maybe it makes sense to drop $60 for a box full of Space Marines that you're gonna end up using in the game. That's a whole unit, but Space Marines are kind of generic. They kind of all look the same, and it gets boring painting those. So when I got back into miniature painting, I started playing Warhammer 40k because for me, I couldn't justify the price of the miniatures without playing the game. I could look at my wife and go, look, I need this unit of Hellblasters because I need it for the game, or I need this flyer, or I need whatever for the game to be competitive, and it just got to be ridiculous. As long as it takes me to paint, I was still getting kind of run over, and eventually I just couldn't do it anymore. And fortunately, my wife finally basically just said, I don't care if you play the game, you enjoy painting the miniatures, just paint the miniatures. So at the same time, I appreciate her saying that, but at the same time I still couldn't justify in my own head dropping $60 for essentially 10 of the same guy without any kind of there's nowhere you can really go creatively with that. And so I started looking into other companies, and there's a lot of other companies out there that make fantastic stuff that aren't necessarily tied to a game. If they are tied to a game, like TT Games Carnivals or Weird Miniatures, trying to complete blank on the name now. Malifaux. Weird Games is Malifaux. If they are tied to a game, they're smaller unit skirmish games where each miniature is an individual character. It's not meant to be, armies of hundreds of guys. It's just meant to be, your 6 guys against my 6 guys kind of thing. And so they're much more focused on the individual miniatures, and so there's a lot more detail. There's a lot less generic soldiery going on there. Even like low-level henchmen still manage to all look different because they all have different roles to play in the game. And so that kind of thing interested me quite a bit more. So I wanted to take a look at some other companies besides Games Workshop that are producing beautiful miniatures. And when I started making out my list and started looking up companies, I ended up with a lot more companies than I really meant to. A bunch of them, like you see here before you, are companies that I've worked with, stuff that I've painted, and stuff that I'm going to paint. Some of these are for upcoming videos. And some of them are, a lot of the companies that I was going to talk about are companies that I haven't actually ordered from, but I've seen their stuff online, I've seen their websites, and the stuff looks beautiful. Excuse me. But I came up with such a long list of videos, or of companies, that I was going to have to break it up into 2 separate videos. So for this video, I want to focus just on the companies that I have actually worked with. These are the companies whose miniatures I've bought, I've painted, or are going to paint soon. These are the ones that I have personally worked with, and the ones that I like. Okay. Next week we will talk about the companies that I have not worked with, but I've seen their websites and can recommend them because they look really fantastic. I've heard good things about them. I've known other people that have ordered them, and they're beautiful stuff. I just haven't personally ordered any or painted them. So let me take a little break and get rid of this thing in my throat, and then when we come back, we'll start talking about the miniatures. All right? See you soon. All right, I'm back, and I think I can talk. All right, so other companies that produce miniatures besides Games Workshop and still produce beautiful stuff that are great for miniature painters. First of all, I'm going to go old school and talk about Grenadier and Ralpartha here. Grenadier and Ralpartha are old miniature companies that started out in the 70s and 80s. They produced beautiful miniatures. I was kind of surprised because for some reason I'd gotten it into my head that all the old school miniatures were kind of crappy in quality and didn't really have a whole lot of detail, but they really are fantastic. This is a good example of a Ralpartha miniature. This is one of the ones I painted for our Forgotten Realms Heroes box set, and just look at all the folds and waves in that outfit, that wizard robe, the detail in the hair and the face and the hands. He looks amazing, and it's just I think it's testament to the quality of the sculpt that this still looks this good after this many years, and took a modern paint job so well after being painted so badly back in the day. It was just horrible. So that's a fine example of Ralpartha. This is one of the Grenadier Demons we did for our Demons series we did last year. And here's another fantastic sculpt with a lot of detail, a lot of texture in the skin, a lot of detail in the face and the teeth and everything. And he's a beautiful little demon. And now the problem with these old school figures is that they're hard to find. You can sometimes find them on eBay. You can, if you know an older painter that's been around forever, he might have some that he wants to get rid of, or he's willing to part with. The Ralpartha miniatures in particular are really hard to find because they've been out of business for so many years, and nobody really picked up their sculpts. Now Grenadier, on the other hand, I don't know that they produce the box sets like the demons and wizards and things that we've done here, but a company called Merleton Miniatures, and I'll put a link in the description below to them, bought a lot of Grenadier's old molds, and so they're producing some of these old school Grenadier miniatures, and you can kind of find them. The difference is they just don't say Grenadier on the bottom of the base. They say Merleton. But yeah, you can still find some of the old Grenadier miniatures from back in the day. But those are a little bit hard to find. Some of the easier to find ones I've got here. Obviously, the granddaddy of them all is Reaper. Reaper's been around almost as long as Reaper came about, almost when Grenadier and Ralpartha went out of business, because they had their 25th anniversary 10, 15 years ago, something like that. It's been a while, but they, yeah, they've already passed their 25-year mark, so they've been in business for a while. And they produce a lot of miniatures and a lot of different lines. Now, they produce, excuse me, they produce metal miniatures like these, and these are old school metal miniatures. And the great thing about Reaper is they produce miniatures with a lot of detail. Like, you can just see all the detail in that figure. I haven't even painted her yet, and she looks amazing. They produce miniatures with a lot of detail, but they also produce them at old school prices. So, like, this metal miniature was $8, okay? You can't buy any Games Workshop figures for $8. That's fantastic. So they got that, and then they got their Bones line, which is kind of a softer plastic. You can see how easily that bends even after being painted and sealed. And this is a wizard that we did for a video some time back. The Bones line is even cheaper. The Bones line is about half the price of the metal miniatures, usually about $2 or $3 a figure. The original Bones line, though, suffers from, like I said, they're really soft, so sometimes you have to heat it up and then cool it down, really bend it back into place and then cool it down. And sometimes it'll stay there, sometimes, like this one, it won't. Also, their detail is lacking in some places. It tends to kind of fall by the wayside, which is kind of too bad because they're beautiful sculpts. To solve the problem of the bendy plastic while still keeping their price down, they came out with Bones Black, which is kind of hard to see because I've already zenithal primed all these miniatures. It's kind of hard to see what these figures are made of, but the Bones Black line is essentially dark gray plastic like the Games Workshop figures. The Bones line is very soft white plastic and says it doesn't need to be primed, but you kind of need to prime it. Same with the Bones Black. They say you don't really need to prime them, but you kind of do if you really want your best results. But again, you get really fantastic detail out of these. I mean, you can see all the rivets on the armor, folds in the cloak. It looks fantastic. And it's a little bit flexible, but it's not as bad as the Bones figures. And lately, they've come out with, and this is going to show up in a future video, this is the Bones USA plastic, which again is a dark gray plastic. Is quite a bit less, well, that's probably a bad example, it's quite a bit less flexible than the Bones, but it takes an amazing amount of detail. I don't know if you can see that on there. She just has beautiful, beautiful details. Runes on the sword, the wrapping on the staff, all the little buckles and stuff on her bodice. Just amazing stuff. And this is the level of detail they're able to get out of this. This, I would put the Bones USA level of detail against anything Games Workshop is producing, and it's less than probably an eighth of the price. This figure here was actually free when I ordered, $40 worth, but is roughly, I think, $8 or $9 by itself. And this would be $30 from Games Workshop. So Reaper is definitely Reaper is my go-to for really good cheap figures. If I want to buy a lot of figures, like especially when I get like my birthday money, I'll go blow it all on Reaper figures. The next company up and the next most easily found is WizKids, which produces both Pathfinder deep cuts and Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures. And those are both fantastically detailed figures. The gelatinous cube here, which you saw in a previous video, and you can see all the little bones and weapon bits and whatnot in there. This is just a fantastically detailed little miniature for being essentially a cube full of debris. And this was probably $5 or $6, I think. Not very expensive at all. But this was part of the Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures line. this knight that's coming up in a future video was part of the Pathfinder Deep Cuts line, and he is just fantastic detail. I mean, look at all those, the folds in the comparison, the folds in his tabard, all this kind of detail. It's just beautiful, beautiful stuff. And all of Pathfinder's Deep Cuts miniatures like that. Again, they come, the Pathfinder's Deep Cuts come pre-primed with like a light gray primer. I've heard good and bad things about the primer. Some people really like it. Some people would rather prime their own. I don't like to risk it, so I prime my own. I like to do the zenithal priming too, so I always end up doing my own. But they got really fantastic detail. Next in line for the most commonly available ones are Weird Miniatures, who produce figures for Malifaux. And these are, the ones I got are all part of the Ten Thunders gang, so they're all kind of like Kung Fu guys. That's why they got the orange base, the main color of them. I wanted to paint them like Shaolin monks. You know. But the Malifaux figures are nice in that, like this guy was all one piece. That's fantastic. Some of them are multi-piece figures. I think this one was maybe 2 pieces, possibly 3. And again, just incredible amount of detail. But sometimes they get really, really fidgety. Like you can see she's just standing on these little high heels. I had to cut those off the tab that go into the base to glue her onto this scenic base. So it was a little bit fidgety to do that. This guy was all one piece, and he barely fits on the scenic base that I got for him because he's got such a wide stance. But also his wrist kind of broke off. I had to glue that back on before I started filming. And I'm not even sure how that happened. Like, I don't know if I banged him against something or what. But they're made out of gray plastic. Not quite as hard a gray plastic as the Games Workshop, but softer than the Bones Black and Bones USA stuff. Excuse me. Again, really nice figures. Really kind of fidgety to put together, and they don't come with instructions to put them together. If you get Weird Miniatures and you have to assemble it, you have to go on their website to find the assembly instructions. They don't put it in with the figures. I don't know why they do that. It's frustrating. But especially if you get like a brand new figure that just came out, they might not have the instructions up on the website yet. So there's that to contend with. Chibi miniatures are something that I've gotten into painting a lot lately. And Cool Mini or Not produces the Arcadia Quest line of miniatures, which, you know, again, for chibis that are meant to be kind of cartoonish and exaggerated, still have a lot of detail to them and a lot of really fine sculpting going on in there, and just beautiful, beautiful stuff. I really like these. This is one that I painted a couple years ago. I've picked up a couple of other companies' chibis for future projects. One of them is Ninja Division, a company called Ninja Division, produces a game called Ninja All-Stars. And they're like little ninja and samurai chibis. And they're fantastic. This one's called Howlin' Yip. He's very clearly supposed to be lone wolf and cub kind of figure. They come on scenic bases already, which is fantastic. I'm looking forward to painting this guy. They come in, again, hard gray plastic, kind of along the lines of Games Workshop's stuff, but they look really fantastic. And then the other miniature company that I found out produces chibis, oddly enough, is Bones. Reaper. Reaper Bones has a line of what they call small world figures, which is basically just chibi versions of their regular figures. I actually bought the small world version of this figure and the actual figure, and I'm going to paint them both the same. But I think I'll get a little more detail out of this one because I normally don't paint eyes, and in the chibis, the eyes are going to be a big deal. So, but yeah, you can see even on this one, a lot of detail. A little belt pouch there, a little sculpting on the axe, all the armor and the hair and everything. A lot of detail in such a tiny little figure. So these are a lot of fun to paint. even if you're not playing the games, like I don't play Arcadia Quest or Ninja All Stars, I just love painting the miniatures, and they look fantastic. Moving on to TT Games. They do the Carnival series. You might remember last year I did a whole series of Carnival figures, and they are kind of along the lines of Malifaux in that it's a small unit skirmish game. Your crew is maybe 10 figures at best, at most, I should say. A lot of crews are less than that. They've got different power ratings and things like that. It's very much Malifaux set in, excuse me, set in 1800s Venice. But again, the level of detail on the miniatures is absolutely beautiful. You can see this is the Black Lamp figure that I did the OSL on. And he's got just fantastic detail in the folds of his clothing, the buckles on his boots, everything. His hair, even when you can barely see it. Even the level of detail on the lamp itself is gorgeous stuff. The Barnabotti is another one. I've actually got two of these. I've got this Barnabotti, and then I've got the one that came with the War Games magazine. And they're both just absolutely gorgeous. So much detail on that dress. So much little fidgety stuff. And it's just absolutely beautiful stuff. And it's a real joy to paint. It wasn't a pain to paint. I even managed to get the little glove on her offhand there. And their scenic bases are gorgeous. Those were a lot of fun to paint. Up next, you might remember I did, at the start of last year, I did a set of Raging Heroes, Daughters of the Crucible line, essentially nuns with guns. I bought those and painted them similar to my Sisters of Battle army, because they were kind of Sisters of Battle stand-ins. Since I ordered these and started painting them, Raging Heroes has come out with a much closer approximation of the Sisters of Battle figures. They've got the backpacks, they've got the bob haircuts, they've got full body power armor, that kind of thing. They look much more like Sisters of Battle and less like, like these look like Hispanic pinup nuns. But these were a lot of fun to paint. Again, like the weird miniatures from Malifaux, these were a little bit fidgety because they're all standing on high heels. I was a little bit hesitant to cut them off the base and glue them onto these new ones. I'm real careful when I'm handling these girls because I don't want to snap them off their base. But the level of detail on them is gorgeous. And it gave me an opportunity to practice some different skin tones, different cloth highlights. The guns look fantastic. Just beautiful, beautiful miniatures. Speaking of beautiful ladies, the last ones I want to talk about are Bombshell miniatures. Bombshell produces a lot of miniatures. I got the Bombshell Babes line because they had a sale going on them. And so I bought, I think, six of the Babes. You get 2 free at the time. And they produce both resin and metal miniatures. And what I got was a mix. I think 3 were resin, or 3 were metal, and the rest were resin. But again, fantastic level of detail on these ladies. Let me see if I can get a backdrop in this. It'll look. There we go. Focus. Focus in. Well, as much as it doesn't want to focus, you can still tell there's a lot of detail there, and the belt pouch and the Celtic knotwork on her loincloth, the bracers, even the detail on the severed head that she's carrying. It all looks absolutely fantastic. And this is just little Red Sonja type figure that I bought and painted. And then that's one of the resin ones. And then the metal ones, this is Kadira of the Desert, and she's one of the metal figures. Again, if I could get it to focus. camera doesn't want to cooperate at all. There we go. As you can see, even going from metal to resin or resin to metal, there's no major loss of detail. There's all still a lot of beautiful details in the swords, the clothing, the leather, face. It's all just fantastic looking stuff. And the only difference really is the weight. The metal ones weigh a little bit more. So yeah, so there's a lot more companies. Like I said, there's a lot of companies that I will talk about next week that I haven't actually worked with, but I've seen their miniatures. I want to order them. I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet. It's just, but there are a lot of fantastic miniature companies out there, other than Games Workshop, that are producing beautiful miniatures, and that I would highly recommend. These are the ones that I have personally worked with and personally painted in each of these lines. And these are the ones that you're probably going to see a lot more of. I'm definitely going to order a lot more Reaper miniatures. You can see just by the fact that 3 out of the 4 that I chose from the Reaper line aren't painted yet, that I've got a lot more coming up in the works. A lot more of the Ninja Division and Reaper Small World ones, more Pathfinders and Nolzur's miniatures. Raging Heroes and TT Games are both foreign companies, so if you order from them, I believe Raging Heroes is in France, and TT Games, I want to say is in Italy, but I may be wrong on that. But if you order from them, just know that their customer service is fantastic. They're communicative with you every step of the way. If something gets delayed, they will let you know before you think to ask, hey, this hasn't shown up yet, what's going on? They will email you and let you know, oh, there's been a delay. And they're really, really fantastic about getting back to you on things like that. But because they're a foreign company, the post office being what it is, it may take a little longer to get those to you. Bombshell Miniatures is an American company. They're based out of Texas. Reaper is an American company, also based out of Denton, Texas. Both of those, when you order from them, they will get to you very, very quickly. Reaper, I have never heard a single bad thing about their customer service. They have always come through. If a miniature is missing a piece, 9 times out of 10 they'll send you a whole new miniature to replace it. They're a fantastic customer service. They do a convention every year where they teach you how to paint and go into all a bunch of other stuff. I have never had anybody say anything bad about Reaper miniatures. Bombshell Miniatures, I haven't heard a whole lot about them outside of my personal experience with them. Personally, I found them very easy to work with. I got my miniatures within maybe a week of ordering them, so they got here really, really quickly. And like I said, they're beautiful sculpts. I didn't have any problems with them. There was nothing wrong with the order. Nothing was broken. So I don't know how their customer service is, but they were very pleasant to deal with. So yeah, there are options out there if you don't want to paint Games Workshop figures anymore. If you don't want to suckle at the teat of Games Workshop, you can kick them to the curb and get some better options. So that's going to do it for this week. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Next week, like I said, we will talk about the miniature companies that I have seen and heard good things about, but have not actually worked with yet. And of course, if anybody wants to order something from any of those companies and send them to me, you're more than welcome to do so. I'm not going to turn down free minis. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and call this done, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye. Hey Brush Monkeys, Tom from Flying Monkey Studios here. If you like what you see, click like down below. If you want to be notified when new videos come out, click subscribe. And in the meantime, if you want to see how to add one of the miniatures that we've painted on this channel to your own collection, check out our Instagram, Tumblr, and Patreon sites. If you want to support us in doing what we do, check out my Patreon site. Check out my merch store at storefrontier.com/FlyMonkeyStudios. You can get t-shirts, sweatshirts, long sleeve shirts, hoodies, all kinds of stuff there. Go check that out. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.